tourists visiting Easter Island always noticed something strange. Every morning when they came to see the Moai statues, they would notice that the statues had moved. Now, most people just shrugged this off as simple pareidolia. After all, these statues have been weathered by wind and rain for hundreds of years. It's only natural that over time they'd begin to fall over. But one historian didn't buy it. He was certain there was a logical explanation behind the moving statues, and he intended to find it. So Dr. Stephen Mills set up hidden cameras around the Ahu Tangariki platform, where 15 of the statues stood. For weeks, nothing unusual was recorded, just the steady drone of the ocean and the rustle of the wind through the grass. But then one night everything changed. What he saw on the camera made his blood run cold. It was the middle of the night when the Moai statues began to stir. One by one, their heads lifted, their torsos straightened, and they stepped off their platforms and shuffled closer together. Then they began to chant. The sound was low and rhythmic, like the beating of a giant's heart. At first, it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Then Stephen realized it was the statues that were making the noise. Their voices echoed across the island, bouncing off the cliffs and through the valleys. They weren't just making any noise either. It was a language Stephen recognized as ancient Polynesian, and the words they were chanting sent shivers down his spine. They were calling to something ancient, something powerful, something evil. As the sun rose, the chanting slowly faded away. The statues returned to their positions on the platform, and by the time the tourists arrived, not a trace of their nocturnal activity was visible. Stephen stared at the statues, his mind racing. What had he stumbled upon? What was the meaning of the chant? And what was it that the statues were trying to keep at bay? He pored over ancient texts, searching for clues. Finally, he found it, a legend from Polynesian folklore, the tale of Tangaroa, the god of the sea, and his son, Moai, the trickster. According to the myth, Moai once tricked his father into sleeping, and while he was asleep, he used a fishhook to pull the islands out of the ocean, creating the land that the Maori people would inhabit. But Moai wasn't content with just creating one island. He wanted to make more, and so he began to pull more islands from the sea. But his father, enraged by his son's actions, woke up and unleashed his fury. He cursed Moai, causing him to lose control of his hook. The islands flew everywhere, and some of them sank back into the ocean, never to be seen again. Only one remained on the surface, and it was this island that became known as Easter Island. But there was more to the story. The legend also spoke of a great evil that Moai had trapped beneath the island, something that would destroy the world if it were ever to escape. And so the Moai statues were placed around the island to keep it imprisoned. And every night they perform a ritual to keep it contained. Stephen realized that the legend was more than just a myth. It was a warning, and the statues weren't just ancient relics. They were guardians charged with keeping the world safe from an unimaginable horror. But why now, after so many years? What had caused this evil to stir? And how long could the statues hold it back? Racing back to the island, Stephen raced to the village, hoping to find someone who knew more about the legend. Old man Tamatoa knew the legend well, but he was reluctant to share his knowledge. After much persuasion, he finally agreed to help Stephen, and together they delved deeper into the island's mysteries. They discovered that the island had been shaken by a series of earthquakes in recent weeks, and this had somehow awakened the evil that lay beneath. But how could they stop it? Tamatoa suggested performing a ritual of their own, a counterspell to keep the evil at bay. It was a risky plan, but Stephen had no other choice. He gathered the townspeople, and together they performed the ritual, hoping it would work. Days turned into weeks, and the chanting of the Moai statues continued every night, but there was no sign of any disturbance. Had their ritual worked? But then one night the chanting stopped abruptly. In its place, a deep, guttural roar echoed across the island. The earth rumbled beneath their feet as if the very island itself were in pain. Stephen and the townspeople looked at each other in terror. They had unleashed something they couldn't control. As the sun rose, they went to check on the Moai statues. They had all fallen over, their bodies broken and shattered. The islanders screamed in terror. They had failed to contain the evil, and now the island was doomed. But that wasn't the worst of it. As they stood there in horror, the ground split open and a massive claw emerged, followed by another and then another. It was like some kind of colossal monster, something straight out of a nightmare. But this was no dream. This was reality. And it was happening right before their eyes. The creature clawed its way out of the island, its body covered in barnacles and seaweed. Its eyes were glowing orbs of pure evil, and its mouth was filled with rows upon rows of sharp teeth. The islanders screamed and ran for their lives. But there was nowhere to hide, nowhere to escape. They were trapped on the island with a creature of pure evil. Stephen stood frozen in place, unable to move as the creature approached him. Its breath was a stench of decay and death, and its eyes seemed to bore into his soul. Then it spoke. Its voice was like the grinding of rocks, and it spoke in a language that Stephen somehow understood. "You have disturbed my slumber, mortal, and for that you shall pay the price." The creature lunged, and Stephen screamed as he felt its claws raking across his body. He awoke with a start, gasping for air. It had been a nightmare, just a bad dream. He was safe. But as he looked around, he realized with horror that it hadn't been a dream at all. His room was in ruins, his books and papers strewn across the floor. And outside, he could hear the distant roar of the creature, the sound of pure evil unleashed. He had to get to the island, warn the others. But as he ran for the door, he slipped and fell, knocking himself unconscious. When he awoke again, he was in a hospital bed, his body bandaged and his head pounding. A doctor stood over him, his face grave. "You had a terrible accident, Mr. Mills," he said. "You fell pretty hard, but luckily you were found quickly and brought here. You'll make a full recovery." Stephen tried to tell him about the island, about the creature, but the words wouldn't come out. It was like a dark cloud had descended on his mind, blocking out any memory of the previous night. As the doctor left the room, Stephen got out of bed and looked around. He knew he had to get home, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then he saw it. On the TV in the corner, the news was reporting on the strange events on Easter Island. The Moai statues had been destroyed, and the island was in ruins. But there was no mention of a creature, no evidence that anyone even knew about it. Did it exist at all? Or had Stephen's mind conjured it up? He went home, but his house was gone. In its place, a new luxury resort had been built. Stephen walked along the beach, staring at the water. The island was still there, but it seemed different somehow. The air was thick with menace, and the waves crashing on the shore sounded like screams in the wind. Then he saw it. A single Moai statue still standing on the beach, its head bent as if in sorrow. As he approached, he could hear the faint sound of chanting, the same chant he had heard in his dream, the chant of the ancient Polynesian gods. Stephen looked back at the island, his heart sinking. He knew then that his nightmare had only just begun. Did Stephen manage to escape the creature's wrath? Or was he doomed to spend the rest of his life running from the ancient evil? What do you think happened next? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends for more exciting stories like this one. Thanks for watching.